It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. This show is brought to you by Audible.com. You go to audibletrial.com/Opperman Report. Get yourself a free audiobook, and you can sign up for free. Get yourself a free audiobook. Help support the show. Okay. Tonight we are live on, let's see, a whole bunch of places. TalkSuperstation.com, Public Streaming Radio Network, awakeradio.us, awakeradio.uk, wolfspiritradio.com, 1800 Online Network, Shaz's Radio, Just Us Radio Network, Scottish Sovereigns on the Land, My Radio Stream, The Opperman Report, on TuneIn.com, and of course on Spreaker. And you can find me in the good old Opperman Report Spreaker chat room. That's where I am right now. Okay, got a little problem with the mic here. Let me tighten this up. Okay, I almost lost my mic, guys. Okay. Oh, boy. Yeah, that's a live radio for you there. Just as I was starting the show, my arm for the microphone got detached from the desk here, and I had to tighten that up. But we're back in business. Okay, and then as soon as I recover from that, we'll be on replay throughout the week on, let's see, High Point Radio on 1700 AM and 100.5 FM. In the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Then we're replayed Sunday mornings on Penny Entertainment, which is on Blog Talk Radio. Saturday mornings, good old Talk Superstation, they replay us over there. Cave Radio Broadcasting plays us twice a week. They pick out their own shows. They go to Spreaker Channel. They pick out what they want to play, and they have their own choice what they want to play. Saturday evening, 7 p.m., CBS Radio, Para X Radio, the CBS affiliate. Thursdays, we got Late Night in the Midlands. Every day, Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We have FPRN Radio. You can always find us on Spreaker. You can find us on TuneIn. They archive all the shows. Stitcher.com archives all the shows. Opperman Report YouTube channel. Hey, you know you want to cheer me up, go to Opperman Report YouTube channel, subscribe, and follow us over there. Just found out that for quite a while, thanks to good old Patrick Ian King, a good friend of the show. He's been helping us out quite a bit over the 18 months we've been doing a show. And he had us hooked up on iTunes podcast. So if you got a Apple device, you want to listen to us on iTunes podcast, you could find us over there. And we're also on the Android podcast. So if you have an Android device, you can find us there as well. I forget the name of it, though. It starts with an R. Podcast something R. I'll look that up for you. I'll have it for you next week, I promise. Got a lot going on this week. I've been doing these big shows with Dr. Dale Griffiths, who was an expert witness on the occult in the West Memphis 3 case. So I'm going to take that interview, and I'm going to combine it and edit it together with an old interview we did with William Ramsey about how he exposed Damien Eccles being involved in the OTO. We're going to put those two together. They're going to play for you this week for the first time on any live radio, on Para X Radio, CBS, Saturday night, and then on Late Night in the Midlands on Tuesday. I got a whole bunch of big West Memphis 3 shows coming up. You're going to love them. Trust me on that. Got a whole bunch of new content in OppermanReport.com in the members section. We did about 5 or 6 interviews this week. We got another 5 or 6 lined up in the week to come. So keep in mind, a lot of new content on there you don't normally see. As for myself, got a busy schedule myself coming up, okay? Tomorrow I'm being interviewed by Dylan Wade in the afternoon. He's going to play it later on, I think, on the People's Internet Radio, because he's on a bunch of stations as well. And I'm going to do an interview with him. We're going to be talking about Donald Trump and Donald Trump's connections to Jeffrey Epstein. Then later on in the week, I'm going to be doing an interview with Vinnie Eastwood on American Freedom Radio on Wednesday night, 10 p.m. So keep an eye out for that. But tonight, waiting very patiently in the background, our guest is John Ferak. and he's the author of Bloody Lies, a CSI-Scandal in the Heartland. He has a book that just came out called Dixie's Last Stand, Was It Murder or Self-Defense? And another one that is a follow-up to the first book, and it's called Body of Proof, Tainted Evidence, in the Murder of Jesse O'Grady. Now, there's going to be a link to all these books on the Opperman Report blog, but fascinating information about how some of these CSI investigators, these crime scene investigators, how they fake evidence to frame up defendants. So, John, are you there?
Yes, I am, Ed. Pleasure to be on the show with you.
Thank you very much for coming on. So, John, tell us about yourself and how you got involved in true crime and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's not exactly something that when I was going to grade school at St. Mary's Nativity in Joliet, Illinois, where I was dreaming of being a true crime writer 35 years later, but that's life. I actually had an interest, though, from a young age to be a journalist, and I still do work as an investigative journalist. I'm based here in Appleton, Wisconsin these days, and I work for Gannett Wisconsin Media. We have 10 daily papers here across the state. I'm about half an hour from Green Bay, so it's not very far to head up to Lambeau Field and with the Packers right up the road and stuff. But as far as my interest in true crime, during my first newspaper job I was in Indiana, South Bend, Indiana. I worked for the South Bend Tribune over there, and I covered a handful of major high-profile criminal cases over there, and just really found these cases really interesting, and really loved to dive into these cases and kind of peel back the onion layers, so to speak. And just kind of as I got older, and when I was working in Omaha, Nebraska, where I was out there from 2003 through 2012, I came across some cases out there that I really thought might really resonate with people across the country, and I was the primary reporter on these cases, so I kind of figured, who better than myself to really, dive into these cases and really, flesh them out and put them together in an objective way that people across the country would find interesting. Ed.
Hey, when you were in Nebraska, did you ever take a look into that Franklin cover-up and the whole case down there at Boys Town?
That came after I was there, and I just have to be honest. I'm not an expert. I know a little bit about some of that stuff. Just kind of. I mean, you couldn't work at the Omaha newspaper even coming. Like I said, I came there in 2003. There's some parts of that story that are obviously absolutely factual. There's some parts of the conspiracy, though, obviously, that obviously were never proven and stuff like that, but nonetheless, the Franklin scandal certainly an interesting conspiracy, and then there's a lot of theories, and I know it ties in, back to the missing boy from Iowa, and I know there was a recent movie that just came out on that too, wasn't there, Ed?
Recently, and I think something like "Where's Johnny?" It's called something like that, or "Where Did Johnny Go?"
Yeah,
is that the one?
Yeah, I was gonna say. In fact, I even saw the Omaha World-Herald actually did an article. It was probably just in the last month or so, but just that there was a movie that's coming out or did just recently come out, about his case, and I think it certainly ties in with the Franklin scandal as well, but. Yeah, like I said, I didn't get to Omaha until 2003, so I was kind of about a decade, late on being able to have any major role as far as, or just any role in covering any of that conspiracy.
Yeah, it popped in my head because I just had Tim Tate from the UK who produced and directed and did all the investigations for the Conspiracy of Silence, the movie about the Franklin cover-up that was covered up. That was supposed to go on the Discovery Channel and was silenced for, I think, 25 years or something crazy like that. So I just had him on the show this week. Yeah. Well, okay, so tell us some more.
Well, let's see. Just as far as some of these cases that I covered that, again, that kind of piqued my interest and really drew me to write about true crime. One I remember in particular when I was in Indiana. It was an odd trial. It was a short Hispanic man that was about 4'10", and the prosecution just kept getting hung juries after 6-6, 7-5, and they tried this poor fella 3 separate times for murder. And it became apparent after I was sitting in the courtroom covering this trial that the state of Indiana's star witness was probably the more likely individual that committed the murder. And the cops had essentially made a deal with him early on in the case. They offered him immunity to testify against this fellow in Indiana named Hector Flores, and like I said, that was kind of my first exposure, to questionable actions in the law enforcement community. Around that same time, too, Ed, there was another case, and Dateline actually covered this, before Dateline was, what it is today. But that same county, Elkhart County, was going to trial against a man named Edgar Garrett. They had charged him with murder and were trying to get the death penalty against Ed. And after watching the 10 or 11 hour interrogation, the interview, it was clear that Ed had given a false confession. Ed had some problems, with alcohol, but this guy was not violent or anything like that. But the detectives basically convinced him that he had an alcoholic blackout, and that he must have, found an axe handle under his couch, and hit his daughter, a teenage daughter, over the head, and killed her that way. So they get him to sign a statement and charge him with murder. And the daughter's body washes up about 3 months later in the Elkhart River, and she died of she had like 40-some stab wounds. When the case went to the jury, obviously, I was stunned and surprised, but actually the jury came back and found Ed not guilty of the murder because the confession didn't match the facts. And that's a case that always stuck with me, and that's going to be important, when I wrote the book Bloody Lies, because there's a lot of journalists and a lot of people around the country, especially 10 years ago, they just didn't believe in false confessions. They figure if the police, arrested somebody, they must have committed the crime, and if somebody confessed to the crime, then they absolutely, are guilty of the crime, when that's not the case, always.
Now, you said that you saw the video of the confession. That's what convinced you?
Yes, in that case, it was several hours. Like I said, somewhere between 7 and 10 hours. We're going back now 15, 17 years. But the thing about it too, Ed, was that this was not kind of a beat-down confession, no torture. They actually befriended the suspect in this case, and the cops were telling them, kind of similar stories, as far as, hey, I hit my, child one time and, I couldn't take it back, and that's what you did, Ed. They're like, you love your daughter, but, you just had a blackout and, and you hit her over the head with an axe handle. And for the longest time, Ed, he's going back and forth, shaking his head, saying, I just can't believe I did this. There's no way I did this. And he eventually comes around to their theory that he must have, harmed his daughter during an alcoholic blackout, and signs the statement, goes along with the cop's theory, but the physical evidence, which is obviously more important than a statement, showed that the facts of the crime didn't match up with what he put on paper.
Okay, but my question is, if he did have remorse and he signed his confession, maybe he killed her by stabbing her, but they just wanted to, he just went along with their theory of the blunt object.
It's possible. Yeah. I always felt that there was a couple other suspects, so that were connected to that family that were more likely, persons, suspects. I don't even want to say persons of interest, more likely suspects that the police had overlooked and stuff like that then. But nonetheless, he went to trial and was found not guilty. And as far as I know, the Elkhart City Police Department never moved ahead with any charges against anybody else, over the last 20 years then.
Very interesting. And you got to interview this guy?
Oh, it's been many years. I know I talked with that in the late 90s or so. He did move ahead with a federal civil rights lawsuit, and I believe he settled for a decent amount of money. I don't think it was in the millions, but I think it may have been at least $100,000. So, but yeah, I mean, he seemed like a decent guy that certainly had his struggles in life, but just I don't think he committed. I don't think he actually committed the murder. I think he just was innocent of that particular crime. Was it somebody connected to his family, an acquaintance of his family that committed the murder? I think that's probably the case.
I guess the moral of the story is, don't talk to the cops and without your lawyer, because you get in there, things can go bad.
Well, and a lot of these cases, that is true. But in a lot of these cases, too, a lot of these individuals have low IQs, and are inexperienced to begin with, and just don't realize kind of the slippery slope that they're going in on. I mean, they're assuming oftentimes that the police are there not necessarily to be their friend, but to be the fact finders. And unfortunately, in too many cases, sometimes the police have tunnel vision or a narrow-minded view as far as just, they think they've already figured out what the facts of the case are. And it's in those kinds of cases, where things, where they lose objectivity. And forget about other scenarios, rather than the scenario that they're locked in on, from the get-go.
Yeah, I got you. So, and how many years ago was that?
Well, let's see. The Edgar Guerra case, we're talking around 1994, 1995 or so.
Okay.
I think Chris Hansen, like I said, Chris Hansen from Dateline had interviewed, did a key story about this case many years ago, like I said, in the late 1990s.
And then what did you work on after that?
I'm sorry, Ed?
What did you work on after that?
Oh, what did I work on after that? Well, let's see. I covered. I left South Bend, Indiana, late 1998, and I was in the Chicago suburbs. I worked for a major newspaper, Arlington Heights Daily Herald, for a year and a half. Really didn't cover that much crime at that during that year and a half or so that I was there. A lot of suburban coverage. I covered a lot of city government and school issues. So I kind of became more well-rounded
a lot of crime
journalist.
There too, though, right?
What's that? Yeah.
A lot of crime in city government.
And then I went up to Green Bay, Wisconsin for about 4 years. Met my wife Andrea up there actually, and let's see, and then but I was an editor for the 4 years, 3.5 or 4 years I was up in Green Bay. So I've kind of bounced around as far as a journalist, kind of between writing and editing. I've kind of gone back and forth a lot over the years on that. And but when I moved to Nebraska, late 2003, then that's really when I strictly went back to writing out there, and that's where I had a chance to cover a lot of these cases. Frankly, actually, all three of the cases that I've written books about, true crime books about, here in the last year or two. Then.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, all of these three cases took place in Nebraska. These books?
Well, two of them did. Two of them took. My first book, Bloody Lies: A CSI-Scandal in the Heartland, which was published by Kent State, and then my recent book that just came out last week, Body of Proof: Tainted Evidence in the Jessica O'Grady Case? Those two happened in Nebraska. Omaha, viewers may or may not know, is actually right on the state line with Iowa. It's right on the Missouri River. So actually, my newspaper, the Omaha World-Herald, we covered a lot of western Iowa. So the case Dixie's Last Stand, which was about a battered housewife in Defiance, Iowa, who ultimately shot and killed her husband, her abusive husband, Scott. That case all happened in the state of Iowa, but because of just a lot of interest throughout Nebraska, that's kind of why I covered that case pretty thoroughly.
Okay, so which story do you want to tell us about first?
I probably wouldn't mind just talking kind of in sequence then, as far as just kind of my first book, and Bloody Lies. It happened in It's a 2006 murder. And for a lot of people that aren't familiar with the case or the story, it is very eerily reminiscent of the Capote In Cold Blood book out of Holcomb, Kansas. Wayne and Sharman Stock, two well-liked, beloved farmers. They lived right outside of a town of 269 people, and they had a Easter gathering on Easter Sunday, April of 2006. They were down the road at a relative's house, came back to their house, and did an Easter egg hunt. They went to bed on Easter Sunday night. The next morning, one of their sons, Andy, comes out to the farm, figuring, him and his dad were going to get to work since they ran a hay business that was pretty lucrative. He can't find his parents anywhere on the property. He eventually goes upstairs and finds his dad face down in a puddle of blood in the middle of the hallway, and there's a handful of shotgun shells on the stairs and right around the body. So it was just a horrific murder, Ed, and again, it's a situation where it happened in a very rural, mostly rural county, Cass County, Nebraska, which only has about 20 to 25,000 people, and so since it happened out in the country, the sheriff's office was tasked with solving the case, and they pretty much all of the detectives had no prior experience investigating or spearheading a murder investigation prior to this murder, and from day one, they're going to lock into a theory that it had to be the victim's nephew, just based on their belief that the family had an estranged, the victims, I should say, had an estranged relationship with Matt, and and they're going to kind of ignore any and all other leads that pointed to somebody else in a different theory as far as how the murders happened.
What do you think if they didn't have any experience? Why wouldn't they bring in the state police?
Well, actually, I should point that out. They did bring in the Nebraska State Patrol was brought in to assist, and Nebraska's a little different. I mean, like I said, I've worked as a journalist in I think 4 or 5 different states, or 4 states, and been in Wisconsin twice. But in Nebraska, a lot of the State Patrol investigators aren't working homicides all the time and stuff. So they did bring in 2 State Patrol investigators that helped out on the case, but it really was the lead agency that was kind of developing leads as far as potential suspects, and and the State Patrol investigators kind of went along for the ride on that aspect of it, Ed. But nonetheless, they brought in the State Patrol, and they brought in the CSI unit out of Douglas County, which is Omaha, but they brought in the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, and their CSI unit had a reputation for working kind of as a regional lab, and kind of worked a lot of high-profile crimes for these smaller towns and smaller agencies that really didn't have expertise as far as with collecting evidence, testing evidence, and processing crime scenes and stuff like that. So to that small agency's credit, yeah, they made contact with the Nebraska State Patrol, and they brought in the Douglas County Sheriff's Office CSI unit to process the crime scene.
And that was the CSI unit that it turns out was the one that was kind of dummying up stuff, huh?
Correct. Well, as far as, it was the head honcho for the agency. So the CSI commander, Dave Kofod, and Dave was out there on day one, along with 3 or 4 of his other well-trained and highly competent employees. But again, there's no evidence or no indication that any of them were engaged in any misconduct. And it's just important to point out, too, just for context for listeners, he was not planting evidence at a crime scene. Any and all the shenanigans that would take place at a later date, and it would take place back in Omaha at his crime lab, which he was the boss. He was the only boss, and he had 24/7 access to the facility, and he pretty much controlled, when his employees were working and what they were working on. So again, as I remember other journalists had told me, they're like, yeah, he's kind of a phantom. Dave was kind of a phantom, as far as how any of this stuff, the misconduct was taking place. Nobody ever saw him red-handed engage in any of the evidence planting, but but when was it taking place? Probably late at night, when nobody was around.
So he would collect the evidence, and he would use legitimate procedures to collect the evidence and document the evidence at the crime scene. But then when he got back to the lab, he would show up back in the middle of the night. And what would he do? How would he sabotage the facts?
Well, and he was very strategic too about this. Ed, it wasn't like he was out at the scene, from noon to 8 p.m. and then 9 o'clock, he's starting to mess around with evidence. It's usually several things are going to happen before he's going to make a decision to plant some evidence. And here's essentially what they are. He wants to make sure that the person that's being investigated by the lead agency, whoever that is, that they basically have a guilty suspect. Right. And what I mean by that is that they either have a confession from that individual, or somebody else that implicated that individual, or there's incredible amount of blood evidence that points to that person as a guilty suspect, okay? And oftentimes it happens to be in a situation where the lead agency doesn't feel like they have enough to yet make the arrest, or certainly go forward, because of speedy trial rules. In Nebraska, I think it was a 6-month speedy trial rule. So if you arrested somebody on May 1st, they were guaranteed going to trial by, November 1st. So the prosecutors were always cognizant of the fact that, if they could hold off a little bit longer on making an arrest, they would do so. But again, with COVID situation, if the cops really were frustrated and felt that they know they got the right guy or guys or persons, but they just kind of felt like they needed a little more evidence or something to kind of get them over the hump, that's kind of when Dave Copeland stepped in on some of these cases and came up with a little bit of blood evidence that helped out as far as in the court of law in the evidence procedures, and it also helped glorify him, and helped hold himself up in the as a high and mighty in the high and mighty pedestal. He was really about seeing himself and being viewed in the media as kind of a hero and a CSI god around the Heartland, Ed.
Now, and you don't think that any of the detectives knew he was doing this?
I investigated that a lot, actually, as a journalist, and that certainly came up a lot in the aftermath of the case with the civil procedures. But I mean, again, I just got to base it on evidence, again, and facts. There's no facts. There's nothing that substantiates, that somehow Dave Copeland was in cahoots with anybody from the Cass County Sheriff's Office or the Nebraska State Patrol, where they're having conversations back and forth and stuff like that. There's just absolutely no evidence, nothing, none of that in any of these cases, and including a prior case that he had gotten away with planting evidence on 3 years earlier in 2003, and that's a case that I mentioned in Bloody Lies as well. But it was a case where a little boy, a 4-year-old boy named Brendan Gonzalez, was murdered by his own father. And the father was just an absolute psychopath, to the point where the father actually blurted out in open court one day, that he killed his son, and and the kid had the Antichrist, the mark of the 666 across his forehead. Just outrageous, sickening stuff. And he would do this to taunt the mother, because the mother was in the courtroom. But he gotten away with, and he hid the boy's body, and the boy's body has never been found to this day. But that's a case where the suspect well, I should say the killer, Ivan Hank, pleaded guilty to the murder. Colt had planted some blood evidence to help secure Hank's arrest, but in that case, the suspect never, raised his hand and said, that some of the evidence is planted against me is false and stuff like that. So he, in some cases, Colt had gotten away with planting evidence, and the defendant didn't even bat an eye on it.
Very interesting. Okay, we're going to have to take a commercial break. We're with John Ferak. He's the author of Bloody Lies, a CSI Scandal in the Heartland. Also, Dixie's Last Stand, Was It Murder or Self-Defense? And just recently, just came out, is Body of Proof, Tainted Evidence in the Murder of Jessica O'Grady. And like I said, there's a link to all this. It came out by a Wild Blue Press, right?
Yeah, that's correct. The last two, my last two books are through Wild Blue Press, Dixie's Last Stand and Body of Proof. My first book came out through Kent State University Press in Ohio, Ed.
And we got a link to the books on the Opperman Report blog. So we'll be right back with more of John Ferak right after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. Pacific West Bamboo, your premier source for sustainable building material. They provide construction-grade and craft-grade bamboo material for all your indoor, outdoor, and gardening needs. Contact them for event planning and display building as well. 503-839-8126. Or you go to their new website, pacificwestbamboo.com. Or you can contact them on Facebook at Pacific West Bamboo. That's 503-839-8126. Amanda from Pacific West Bamboo was our first sponsor. She's been so good to us, so please support her in return. I want to make everybody aware of our new members section at www.oppermanreport.com. You can go there and sign up for a monthly, quarterly, or yearly subscription. You can even purchase episodes one by one. You get full access to brand new original content, new guests, new uncensored interviews, my own investigations and reports, and we're going to be adding sections with documents, images, police reports, either provided by myself or by my guests, or for my own investigations, my own reports. So you can go to oppermanreport.com, and you can sign up there tonight. You can start listening tonight. Strawman. I want to mention Strawman. Strawman is a band out of Toronto, Canada. They're good friends at the Opperman Report. They're a trio of guys who share the same mindset most of us here do, and they put that energy into their words and music. So check them out at strawmanmusic.com and drop them a line to let them know that you heard them here on the Opperman Report. We'll be doing an interview with Sean Duffy soon. You can get an autographed copy of my book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator, by visiting my PI website, emailrevealer.com. We also offer a computer and cell phone forensics. We can recover deleted text messages to uncover infidelity. We offer asset searches, locates, email tracing, background reports, and we can even trace your spouse's email address back to internet dating websites to catch them cheating online. You can reach us at 800-572-9762, or you can email me at emailrevealer@aol.com. New World Mexican Women. Everyone loves the New World Mexican Women, and their line of fine, handcrafted, authentic Mexican jewelry of stone mosaic and abalone stone inlay. In their first book, titled New World Mexican Women, available on lulu.com, they teach you how to make this jewelry, and they have a collection of love letters to their men from their hometown that have immigrated to the United States to find work. They have also published a new book entitled Azuquina to the Rodeo. It's about a young girl that falls in love with a rodeo bull rider, and she runs away with him without telling her family. You can find the New World Mexican Women by Googling New World Mexican Women. And you can ask them about their deals on wholesaling their fine jewelry and all of the other projects that they have going on. If you'd like to have your business or website advertised here and promoted all over the world on dozens of stations every day, Give us a call at 800-572-9762 or email oppermanreport@gmail.com. And now back to our show. Welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. This show is brought to you by Audible.com. Go to audibletrial.com/Opperman Report. Get yourself a free audiobook. You can sign up for free. Get a free book tonight. We're here tonight with John Ferak, the author of Bloody Lies, a CSI Scandal in the Heartland. Another book, Dixie's Last Stand, Was It Murder or Self-Defense? And Body of Proof, Tainted Evidence in the Murder of Jessica O'Grady. John, real quick, going back to the farmhouse murder, what exactly did this CSI technician, how did he fix the evidence in that case?
Well, in that case, like I mentioned earlier, the nephew of the victims became the suspect from day one. Okay, and Matt Livers is his name, and Matt had about a 70 IQ. He had some mental limitations, and Matt was doing anything and everything he could to cooperate with the police. And again, as we talked about earlier, never even thought about getting an attorney. In fact, his mom was the murder victim's sister. So this was really a double tragedy to have her son accused of the murder. Over several hours, Matt basically answers. He's actually asked right or wrong to several questions from one of the frustrated investigators about the crime, and he answers right to all these questions, basically implicating himself, as the murderer. Then he throws in a cousin of his as the suspect. Okay, now. The problem with this confession, though, is that a lot of it didn't match up with the physical evidence at the crime scene. And the cops obviously raided Matt Livers' house. They also raided his cousin's property, and they couldn't find any evidence, any blood at all. They took a shotgun from one of the cousins, and ballistics test showed it could not have been the murder weapon that was used. So again, Matt and his cousin are arrested. They're sitting in jail for several days, charged with the murder. And but there had been a car from one of the cousins within their family that was pegged as the getaway car in the murder. Okay, and this car was checked early in the case. Dave Colford and his agency spent actually 8 hours. They went through this car from midnight to 8 in the morning, and there were a couple stains in the car, but nothing that was blood. Okay, and they relayed that back to the lead agency, and the cops just couldn't believe them. But they were just flabbergasted because they were sure that they had the right getaway car. After the arrest happened, Colford on his own, Dave Colford, the CSI commander, decides apparently to go back to the car again on his own, and he's going to claim that he's going to check underneath the dashboard of the car, and lo and behold, the only spot in the car that he checks that day, right underneath the steering column, essentially where you would put your knee up if your knee kind of bumped up, while you're driving. But essentially, he's going to claim that he finds a small amount of blood on one of his crime lab filter papers. Okay, and just for listeners, these filter papers are a lot like Pringles chips, basically. As far as just they're kind of oval shaped, and it's essentially what a lot of crime scene investigators use to swab for evidence. And in this case, they did some preliminary tests on this, and the paper turned pink, which signified that there was a possible presence for blood. And this filter paper then is going to be sent to a third-party independent DNA lab, and it's going to come back with a positive, I should say, a full DNA profile of one of the farmer murder victims, Wayne Stock. So that's what Colford did in that case. And again, just for listeners, this was a very bloody crime scene. And Kofod and his employees, his CSIs, were at the crime scene for three or 4 days, pulling double shifts, working hard, doing the right thing as far as collecting evidence, and going through the farm, trying to find any and all clues, that were paramount to this murder investigation. All those clues went back to Dave Kofod's crime lab, including some blood that they found on the walls that stained the walls, and also a bloody shirt from one of the murder victims as well. That was bagged and brought back to the crime lab as well to hold on to, for evidentiary purposes, Ed.
Yeah, so just imagine, if you were at this bloody crime scene and there's enough blood on your knee that if you tap your knee under the steering column, there's going to be a little bit of blood on your elbow. There's going to be something on your butt, on your ankle. You know what I mean? It's going to get all over the car, all the different spots all over.
Well, and that was the thing. Right, and then when the two interrogators were interviewing Matt Livers, I mean, those are the kinds of questions they were asking him, and he's going along saying, there would have been they're like, didn't you feel something wet on you? And he's like, yeah, blood. And so, I mean, they knew it was a bloody crime scene. I mean, everybody did. So, I mean, to go into Matt Livers' house, take out basically 7 or 8 bags of trash bags of his clothing, and find no blood anywhere, in his property. The lead investigators from Cass County and the Nebraska State Patrol, the 2 guys that were assigned to this case, they just couldn't believe it. I mean, they were locked in. This is, just tunnel vision. They were just absolutely convinced they were on the right path. They thought this was a jealous fit of rage by a family member because, that's what everybody else in the family had told them. But the thing is, the cops overlooked one of the most obvious clues at the crime scene, and that was the fact that one of the window screen behind the house had been taken off, and it was just laying out on a pile of rocks. And upon further inspection, you could see that there was a puncture hole in this window screen, and the window was popped open. I mean, or I should say, the main window, the glass window, was actually lifted open a handful of inches. And again, middle of April, this was cool, Nebraska. Even one of the other CSIs noticed that, and he was spending a lot of time taking photographs of this. But that lead agency that worked the case just kind of told them, that window screen's really not, relevant. They didn't think that somebody had broken into the house and tried to, invade the house. They just were convinced that Matt Livers, or somebody like him, a family member, just walked right in the front door, shot Wayne and Charmin dead in their bed while they were asleep, and walked right out the house afterwards and left.
And did we ever resolve who committed that murder?
Yeah, we're fortunate in a lot of respects in this case because this one at least never turned into an actual wrongful conviction. I mean, the 2 wrongly accused suspects spent many months in jail, and they were on the verge of going to trial. But while they were still sitting in jail, there was a ring that had been found inside the crime scene at the farmhouse in the kitchen. And again, this is a case, it's so unusual to have a case like this where this may be one of the best CSI, investigations ever as far as just tracking a piece of evidence that's going to solve this case. But at the same time, there's all kinds of scandal involved in this case. But what happened was, there was a ring that was dropped at the crime scene. And it had an engraved inscription on it. It said, "Love always, Corey and Ryan," and it also had a serial number on the inside. Long story short, just because I know we're up against time, but that ring's going to trace back to a Walmart store in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. Actually about an hour from where I live nowadays. But this ring had come from the Beaver Dam in Walmart, and the fellow that was the recipient of this ring from his girlfriend had his truck stolen that very same weekend that these murders happened 500 miles away in Nebraska. It was a pair of joyriders, 2 teenagers from Wisconsin, a teenage boy named Greg Fester and his 17-year-old girlfriend, Jessica Reed. Both of them had stolen this truck. They stole some weapons, some shotguns back in Wisconsin, and then also at a house in Iowa that they had burglarized and vandalized, I should say, in the hours before they arrived in Murdock, Nebraska. And so they were, all kinds of evidence doomed them and came up. And in the Wisconsin detectives, especially a guy named Jim Rohr, R-O-H-R, who's now a police chief in Fox Lake, Wisconsin, but he was instrumental and just did a fabulous job on this case as far as just getting to the bottom of the truth of the matter and proving that Greg Fester and Jessica Reed were the real killers, and that the cops in Nebraska, had just got it wrong from day one, as far as thinking that this was a family jealousy or family problems and stuff like that associated with revenge, when it wasn't that way at all. And the fact then, Ed, so you get that once the case is solved, that's kind of where, the questions are going to start to arise with Colford, because right now he's still kind of lurking in the shadows. He kind of faded out of this case. So it's going to take another 3 years, for the FBI to build a case and really investigate the case fully before he's actually going to go on trial himself, being accused and charged with fabricating evidence in this case. It's going to take a while for that to actually unravel.
And for those 3 years, he was still the head of the crime lab?
Correct. In fact, actually, this is another interesting aspect of this whole case. His own agency, his sheriff, actually, had launched back in 2008. So about a year after the two real killers were sentenced to prison for the murders, and the two innocent men were let out of jail and had their charges dismissed. But in one of the federal lawsuits, it was alleged that somebody in this case must have planted evidence in this car, that had the victim's blood, and the lawyers had pointed out they didn't know who did it, but they were pretty convinced that somebody must have did it, because clearly this Nebraska car had no involvement, no connection with the crime. The real car, the real getaway vehicle that was used, was a Dodge Ram red pickup truck that came out of Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. Okay, so but actually the sheriff's office launched an internal probe, and they wrapped this thing up in about 2 or 3 weeks and put out a press release and made sure all of us in the news media knew about it. But they gave Dave Colford a polygraph, and actually by a very inexperienced polygrapher who actually was within the agency. They didn't ask anybody outside the agency to do an independent investigation of Colford or even explain how in the world he could have even found blood, under the circumstances he did, if this car was not connected to the crime. But nonetheless, the sheriff's office put out a glowing press release saying they cleared Dave Colford of any planting or any allegations of planting evidence in the Murdock farmhouse murders, and the sheriff reiterated his strong belief in Dave Colford and everything that he had been doing for the Douglas County Sheriff's Office Crime Lab. So it seemed at that point in time maybe the investigation was dead, and maybe the sheriff's press release was going to, just kind of put a kibosh on it. But the FBI had a different attitude, and they didn't stop their investigation at all, despite in spite of the sheriff's office clearing Colford of planting evidence in this case.
Now, did he have some kind of excuse or some kind of a reasoning why this could happen?
Yeah, he eventually is going to come up with a theory that this wasn't a good theory either. I mean, but it's the lesser of the two evils, though, Ed. But his theory was that somehow either he or somebody in his crime lab must have accidentally contaminated the car, or their filter papers with blood from the crime scene. His theory was that they probably had some of their equipment. They had a staging area outside on the back porch at the murder house, and the first day or two they were there was a lot of chaos because these other agencies were there and kind of walking around, and so many people were in and out, and that was his theory was that unintentionally, but somehow maybe one of us could have accidentally got some blood from the crime scene actually into our either on the it's called a Doji kit. DOJI is the brand manufacturer, but on their Doji kit, or possibly on the filter papers. So when COVID would have gone to the car the second time around to swab an area that he claimed maybe they forgot to check the first time around, somehow that's how he got blood into this getaway car, or this car that was never involved in this murder to begin with.
Now, with that other case, so with the man who had killed his son, do you think that he would have? You said he had never raised his hand in the courtroom and said, "Hey, you got that wrong." But do you think he consulted with his attorney and told his attorney that the evidence was incorrect?
Well, he did not at that point in time. I mean, it's always interesting sometimes how key people overlap in these cases. The lawyer, his lawyer was named Jerry Soucy. Jerry Soucy then also happens to be the lawyer for one of these two wrongly accused men in the farmhouse murders 3 years later. Jerry's representing Nick Sampson, the cousin. But it's at that point in time, at least Jerry's got the perspective. And again, during that first case, there was just so much going on with that case that, and again, at that point in time, nobody had raised any suspicions about COVID. He was this 5-star CSI. Everybody thought that he was on top of the world, and there was no reason to be suspicious of him back in 2003. But it's really when this 2006 murder case just really goes south, on everybody, where the wrong two people were charged with the murders. That's really where COVID was left hanging out there, because now the question is, well, how in the hell, did he find blood, in a car that had nothing to do with the murders, when we now know that the Wisconsin teenagers were the real killers. And so it's kind of that perspective, being able to Monday morning quarterback on COVID after the fact, that you're able to study him and study his pattern of behavior. And in that 2003 case, I should point out, he and one of his partners, they had gotten a call. They were told that Ivan Hank claimed that he dumped his 4-year-old son's body into a dumpster in a neighboring town, Bellevue, Nebraska, which is where Appleton Air Force Base is. But Hank took the cops on this wild goose chase, and just pointed to this dumpster, and claimed that he put his son in there 5 months earlier. Okay. The dumpster's taken into custody 5 months after the murder had happened, and COFA's going to search this dumpster and take some of this garbage. And it's what you expect. I mean, just pop bottles, broken glass, just all kinds of awful stuff. But he's going to grab some of that stuff and bring it back to his crime lab. And he's going to claim that he finds a small amount of blood, while he was testing some of those objects back in his crime lab. And again, 2003, nobody's raising questions, or at least if they were keeping it to themselves. Okay, but that little piece of blood, or the small amount of blood that he claimed he found, gave the prosecutor enough confidence to finally move ahead with a murder charge a month later, even though the little boy's body had never been found.
Oh, boy. So now, how did he ultimately get caught?
COVID, you mean?
Yeah.
The CSI?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's... He's actually charged. Again, it's based on strong circumstantial evidence, but a special prosecutor had charged him with fabricating evidence, and the case goes to trial in 2010, March of 2010. And again, it's based on circumstantial evidence, but the prosecutor was allowed by the judge to present 404 evidence, which means he was able to show both cases, pattern of behavior, pattern of misconduct. So the prosecutor was able to point out that in both of these cases, you had a lot of the same striking similarities where Kofod had some blood from the murder victims already in his possession. Okay, in both cases, there was a confession. In both cases, the cops were struggling, the lead investigators were struggling for more evidence to either make an arrest or move forward with their case in court. And Kofod had this reputation of kind of being the hero and saving the day, and also finding evidence that his other employees had missed. So when the case goes to trial, and it actually went before a judge, Kofod waived his right to a jury trial, which was probably a bad move in retrospect. But he asked for a bench trial, and the judge in that case, Randy Riemeyer, decided that Kofod did in fact plant evidence in both of these cases, and ultimately sentenced Kofod to 4 years in prison, which meant in Nebraska you serve half of your time usually, so with good behavior. So Kofod wound up serving 2 years in Department of Corrections from 2010 through most of 2012 then.
Did they go back and re-examine all his other cases, and were other cases overturned and reopened?
Not really, and that's kind of what where I kind of left things up in the at the end of the book in Bloody Life. But there was the sheriff's office really never did any type of outside independent audit or any type of independent investigation as far as looking at the extent or severity or how widespread his forensic fraud was, because there was also allegations from one of his other employees that that he may have been fabricating fingerprint evidence or fingerprints on handguns, to help out on those cases as well for the Omaha police. But no, there was really never any outside probe that was done. The Nebraska Supreme Court was asked at one point in time to weigh in, and they determined based on state statute that they did not have the authority to appoint an independent panel or blue ribbon commission or anything like that to do any type of investigation. So the only way anything was going to, would come up, and this is kind of gets into body of proof, last week's book that came out, but the only way anything would ever come up is through a convicted killer, or a convicted, person, or, an aggressive lawyer basically filing a post-conviction petition making the allegation. It would have to come up on an individual case-by-case basis, and then through the Nebraska court system.
And that never that never happened? No one who was serving 10, 15 years, said, hey, well, look at this, we got a great appeal here.
Well, there's only a handful of people that I know that did that, and one is the person that's in my in my book Body of Proof. Okay. The Jessica O'Grady murder case. That's one of the few cases that that somebody has come forward. The problem too, though, Ed, is that there's so many of the people that were incarcerated. Kofod may have played a very minor role in their case, or they may not have even have known, whether or not he was involved, or what extent he was involved in their case. So it's really only the cases where that he played a key role, where he was out there front and center collecting evidence, testifying in court, processing the crime scenes, that any defendant would really even have a viable argument to make. And even then, they would have to show they could just making the argument Kofod planted evidence wouldn't work with the court system. They've rejected a couple of appeals already on that kind of stuff. The courts have argued, or the courts have maintained, that these defendants have to have specific allegations for them to even give these people the time of day back in the court system.
Amazing. Okay. Well, we got about a minute left before the break. Do you have any appearances coming up you want to promote, or book signings or anything?
Yeah, actually, thanks, Ed. Yeah, actually, on Thursday, August 6th, I'll be back in Iowa. I'm going to visit Harlan, Iowa, which is actually where the trial of Dixie Shanahan, who is the subject of my second book, Dixie's Last Stand, Was It Murder or Self-Defense? That's where the trial and the case basically originated. So I'll be out there at the Harlan Public Library. I'm doing a 2 p.m. Presentation and then a 7 p.m. presentation again on Thursday, August 6th. And I'll have the books available as well to sign for folks that are interested.
Okay, great. So we're here with John Ferak, author of Body of Lies, A CSI-Scandal in the Heartland. We'll be discussing his other two books when we get right back after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. Pacific West Bamboo, your premier source for sustainable building material. They provide construction-grade and craft-grade bamboo material for all your indoor, outdoor, and gardening needs. Contact them for event planning and display building as well. 503-839-8126. Or you go to their new website, pacificwestbamboo.com. Or you can contact them on Facebook at Pacific West Bamboo. That's 503-839-8126. Amanda from Pacific West Bamboo was our first sponsor. She's been so good to us, so please support her in return. I want to make everybody aware of our new members section at www.oppermanreport.com. You can go there and sign up for a monthly, quarterly, or yearly subscription. You can even purchase episodes one by one. You get full access to brand new original content, new guests, new uncensored interviews, my own investigations and reports, and we're going to be adding sections with documents, images, police reports, either provided by myself or by my guests, or for my own investigations, my own reports. So you can go to oppermanreport.com and you can sign up there tonight. You can start listening tonight. Strawman. I want to mention Strawman. Strawman is a band out of Toronto, Canada. They're good friends of the Opperman Report. They're a trio of guys who share the same mindset most of us here do, and they put that energy into their words and music. So check them out at strawmanmusic.com and drop them a line to let them know that you heard them here on the Opperman Report. We'll be doing an interview with Sean Duffy soon. You can get an autographed copy of my book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator, by visiting my PI website, emailrevealer.com. We also offer a computer and cell phone forensics. We can recover deleted text messages to uncover infidelity. We offer asset searches, locates, email tracing, background reports, and we can even trace your spouse's email address back to internet dating websites to catch them cheating online. You can reach us at 800-572-9762, or you can email me at emailrevealer@aol.com. New World Mexican Women. Everyone loves the New World Mexican Women, and their line of fine, handcrafted, authentic Mexican jewelry of stone mosaic and abalone stone inlay. In their first book, titled New World Mexican Women, available on lulu.com, they teach you how to make this jewelry, and they have a collection of love letters to their men from their hometown that have immigrated to the United States to find work. They have also published a new book entitled Azuquina to the Rodeo. It's about a young girl that falls in love with a rodeo bull rider, and she runs away with him without telling her family. You can find the New World Mexican Women by Googling New World Mexican Women. And you can ask them about their deals on wholesaling their fine jewelry and all of the other projects that they have going on. If you'd like to have your business or website advertised here and promoted all over the world on dozens of stations every day, give us a call at 800-572-9762 or email oppermanreport@gmail.com. And now back to our show. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by Audible.com. Go to audibletrial.com/Opperman Report and get yourself a free audiobook. I just want to remind everybody that later on this week, tomorrow, I'm going to be interviewed by Dylan Wade, who's that young man who has all those different radio shows all over, and also Vinny Eastwood from American Freedom Radio. I'm going to be doing his show on Wednesday evening of this week coming up. Also, I'm going to be doing a follow-up show with Doug Schrader and David Schrader and Doug Millar. We're going to be doing our second show on Ted Gunderson, and that will be available in the members section. Tomorrow evening, I'm probably going to be doing a show with Hank Harrison, who's the father of Courtney Love, and he's going to be coming back on. He's having a little problem with he's having some kind of struggle where he's losing his ranch or something. I'm not really sure what the facts are, but he put up a GoFundMe. The GoFundMe is on my Facebook page, and he's going to come on and explain what his troubles are over there. Maybe we can help him out. I'm hoping to have Sean Duff from Strawman, the band, to come on right after Hank Harrison, and we'll introduce him to the audience. And Kathy Banansky, she's going to be coming back too as well. She has a brand new book that just came out. Everybody loved her, by the way. I have an interview with her in the members section. Everybody loved her because she knew Richard Ramirez and she knew Drew Peterson, all this crazy stuff. She had this friend who killed this woman in his garage, and he cooked her and he ate her. She's a fascinating author. Tells a great story. She has a new book that just came out, but she's been working with this woman on death row, and they just got this woman off death row. And now this woman needs a wheelchair and stuff like that, and a shower chair. She's been on death row for years and years and years. They found out she's not guilty. So she's just got out, and we're going to be doing an interview with the two of them as well over the weekend. And that'll probably be going live on Sunday night. Otherwise, the rest of the stuff goes into the member section. Okay, but tonight we are here with John Ferak. Bloody Lies, a CSI scandal in the Heartland. Amazing. Dixie's Last Stand, was it murder or self-defense? And then the latest one that just came out is Body of Proof, Tainted Evidence in the Murder of Jessica O'Grady. Oh, boy, John. Okay, so we had this. What a mess, man. So what do you want to take us to next? What happens next?
Well, let's see. Dixie's Last Stand, if you don't mind, we could talk a little bit about that,
sure.
If that's okay, just to kind of keep things in chronological order. I don't know why, but just as an author, the way I kind of put together my books and just kind of do my research, I just have to work off of timelines and just do my investigations from a chronological standpoint.
Yeah, I like that too. When I have a guest on, I like to talk from the beginning of their life until the present time, and go back. So we can do it in order. That's good.
Okay. And the case with Dixie's Last Stand is a lot different than Book 1 and Book 3. And frankly, one of the reasons I covered this case, from the moment I first found out about it, which was I think my second or third day on the job in October of 2003 in Omaha at the World-Herald newspaper. But the thing about it too was one of the reasons why I wrote this as a book too. It was I kind of wanted to find something too that was a little bit the opposite of Bloody Lies, where in Bloody Lies, for the most part, it's about police, especially in Nebraska, police incompetence and then just outright corruption with the CSI director that goes to prison. But the one thing that I felt kind of got overlooked with Dixie's Last Stand, and that was a case that got some national news media attention as well. The Los Angeles Times, which is obviously is a major national paper, but they actually came out to Iowa at one point in time and did a story about this case. Leonard Pitts, famous columnist in Miami, he has written a few columns about this case too over the years as well. So it's gotten some national attention, and I memory serves too, Court TV actually covered, broadcast the trial, because in Iowa courtrooms are open to the television news media. But the one thing I kind of felt was a little overlooking too was just the fact that this was in a real small town, real small county, 13,000 people. And the sheriff's department that worked this case only had about 7 or 8 sworn officers. And the sheriff actually did a lot of his own investigations himself. And I just thought that the sheriff's office in this case, once they became aware of this real creepy, bizarre mystery of an adult male that had been missing for a long time, about a year at that point in time. But within just a few short months, they were able to get to the bottom of things and and find the body of Scott Shanahan.
And they found the body there in the house, right? Wasn't it?
Correct. Yeah. Scott Shanahan was about 40 years old at this point in time, and it was in October of 2003 when the sheriff's office finally kind of exhausted all their leads as far as, they've been working the case for about 3 months. That's all the time that they were aware of his disappearance. Again, Defiance, Iowa, where Scott and his wife Dixie and their small children lived, is a town of about 400 people. So there's no police department in that town. The nearest agency was the Shelby County Sheriff's Office, which was based in the county seat of HEARTLAND, Iowa, 13 miles away, 12 or 13 miles up the road on Highway 59. So, but when the sheriff's office becomes aware of the case, they're interviewing Dixie. She maintains that Scott left her and ran off, possibly with another woman. And none of this stuff is adding up, though. The sheriff's office, the sheriff is, contacting other agencies. He's following up on, mail to see if there's any forwarding addresses for Scott Shanahan. He's checking for driver's licenses in other states. He's checking unemployment to see if Scott's collecting unemployment. He's checking to see if he's, got a job and paying taxes. And there's just no trail of Scott anywhere. So really about the last place to check, as far as the sheriff thought, was going on to the property. And Scott and Dixie had, it's a nice piece of property, actually, they inherited from Scott's late parents. It's a ranch on 3rd Avenue, and it's got a huge yard and a lot of mature trees in the backyard. But the sheriff's office went there with the state patrol, I should say the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigations, and armed with a search warrant. And first they're checking around the yard, checking around to see if there's any holes dug, anything like that. They don't find anything. Nothing really in the house stands out. And finally, they work their way down toward the back, I should say the northeast bedroom. And there's a bunch of clutter, all kinds of junk that's piled up in the hallway. I mean, this thing really would have been a major fire trap, actually, Ed. There's there's a Coleman cooler, blocking the hallway. There's a bunch of big cardboard boxes, just all kinds of stuff kind of stockpiled in the middle of the hallway. And when they get to the back bedroom door, they try to open it, and it's locked. One of the DCI agents tries to go in through the bathroom. There was a bathroom that had a door that led to the bedroom as well, and that door wouldn't open as well. It wasn't locked, but I don't believe it was locked, but it had something pushed up against it. Long story short, one of the investigators finally gets, I think he had a knife or something like that. He was able to jimmy the door open, kind of pry it open, and once they open the bedroom door, lo and behold, they're just overcome by the smell. Scott Shanahan had been left in his bed, dead, for 14 months. He had been there for since late August of 2002, and this is late October of 2003. He was shot once in the back of the head, and as soon as he was shot, Dixie pulled his wife Dixie had pulled the blanket, the covers, just over him and left him in that bedroom for 14 long months.
Now there was no smell?
Oh yeah, there was the smell was awful for the cops. But the thing is, and this was what's kind of interesting, there was no smell throughout the house, throughout the rest of the house. There was the cops had also found there was long bath towels that were placed underneath both of the doors. So the door leading to that bedroom had a towel. A long towel that was placed underneath that quarter-inch or half-inch area of the door, on the bottom of the door, and the same was true with the bathroom door. And there was also a handful of candles an air freshener that they found on the floor as well, just kind of sitting right next to the bedroom door as well to help mask the smell. But again, once they opened the door and walked into the bedroom where the dead body was, yeah, you could definitely smell something awful, and he was down to about. I think the autopsy determined he weighed 42 pounds at the time that they, bagged him up and brought him to Ankeny, Iowa, to do the autopsy the next day.
Well, okay, so then what's the controversy here? You got a dead body, you got a woman lying about it. Her defense, I guess, was self-defense.
Correct, and the background on this was that this was an unusual case, Ed, from the standpoint that most people, or at least a lot of people that lived around this area, felt sorry for Dixie and rallied to her defense because her husband was very abusive and was just regarded as a jerk. He had he had been arrested on three separate occasions for domestic abuse, domestic violence against her. 2 times he went to jail for a short period of time. The third time, the cops and the prosecutor really thought that they were going to send him away to prison. They went to the home actually at the request of one of Dixie's friends, a woman by the name of Brenda Johnson, and Brenda was trying to help Dixie get out of this terrible, tumultuous relationship with Scott, to pack her bags and get her to move to Texas, where she had several family members down there. And Brenda showed up at the house one day, and saw the cars in the driveway, but went to the door, and nobody would answer the door, and she knew something was up. So she called the sheriff's office. They came out, and they eventually walked around the property, found a spare key, announced their presence, and went in, opened the door, or Brenda opened the door, one of the two. But when they went inside, they found Scott he was holding Dixie captive in one of the closets, and both her eyes just looked horrible. They were just black and blue, and the 2 kids then emerged, small kids, 2 and 4, I think, but they emerged out of one of the bedrooms, and Scott was taken away, charged with felony domestic violence. Dixie goes down to Texas for a few months while Scott's in jail. And it's while she's down there, she kind of has a change of heart and decides that she's not going to help the police and the prosecutor move forward, with convicting Scott. So she's going to refuse to come back to Iowa, even though Iowa was going to pay for her airfare and any and all lodging and food, whatever she needed to get her to testify. She wrote the prosecutor back and informed her, that she wanted, her family to be intact, and she felt that for the family to be whole again, Scott Shanahan needed to be part of it. So it's just one of these unfortunate situations. Dixie's life was a lot about just these terrible blunders or terrible decisions that she makes that really compounded her situation and put her where she is today, which is still serving a prison sentence.
Well, let me ask you this, though, but this tiny little town where they only had 7 cops on the force, and they were going to fly her back to testify in a domestic violence case?
Well, the county, yeah. I mean, the Shelby County Attorney's Office was gonna do that, yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's a small county, but again, they didn't have obviously they didn't have a huge budget, but on the other hand, they also didn't have, they would only have maybe one murder every 4 or 5 years too, though. And this was not a murder, but nonetheless, they didn't have a lot of an incredible amount of crime to begin with. So,
okay.
She wouldn't come back, and unfortunately for her, the rest is history. Then she and Scott get back together. The problems arise after she finds out that she's pregnant with their 3rd child, and their money situation is in the red and just getting worse. By the summer of 2002.
And her defense at trial was self-defense.
Yeah, she's gonna. again, too, Ed, she's relying on public support, and then again, there have been a fair amount of media coverage that have been very sympathetic toward her as a domestic violence victim, and just people didn't think that she would be convicted of the charge of murder, which was what she was facing. The thing is, journalists like myself and others really didn't know all the facts until we actually sat in and covered the trial. And her story, her version of events was that she and her husband got into an argument during the morning of August 30th, 2002. Scott's going to grab some telephones, she's going to claim, and to take the phones away from her so she can't call the police or talk to anybody. Grabs the phones and grabs the shotgun, and and tells her this day is not through, and basically threatens that he might kill her later today. Her story is that she decided that day, once and for all, she's going to, get those phones and call the police, and report him for domestic violence again, for beating her up again that day. And she's going to say she goes to the back bedroom. She notices the shotgun's right up against the bed, and she saw Scott in the bed, and she thought that he grabbed for the shotgun, thinking he's going to shoot her. So she grabbed for it first and shot him in self-defense. That's going to be her statement, story that she's going to give. The trouble, though, is that the crime scene evidence in the autopsy really presented a much, much different scenario than her emotional plea that she tried to make before the jury.
Yeah, what did they come up with?
Well, just again for background for people, the shot that Scott suffered was through the back of his head, and it was a shotgun blast, that he took basically in the back of his skull. So that immediately, raised red flags as far as how could this be self-defense when the wound that he suffered, the fatal wound that he suffered, is through the back of his head. You would think if it was self-defense, there really was a struggle, he should have got shot, in the front, in his chest or in front of his face, not the back. The other thing, too, was that the way his body was positioned in the bed, too, Ed, it just, he was on his pillow. He had another pillow between his knees. Apparently he slept that way. Prosecutor was able to present a just very convincing argument that Scott was sleeping at the time that it was shot. And the prosecutor didn't dispute the fact that Dixie Shanahan had a troubled life and that she had been a victim of domestic violence on numerous occasions. And he did feel sorry for her for those circumstances. But on the other hand, did they give her a license to just outright blow Scott away? License to kill him? Certainly not, is what he maintained. And when the case went to the jury, even though this was a hometown jury, and Dixie had rejected opportunities to plead bargain down to a much lesser charge and serve only a short, what would amount to just a few years in prison, the jury found her guilty of second-degree murder. And from there, then the case kind of becomes a little controversial, too, because Iowa had these mandatory prison sentence laws for certain violent offenses. And in this case, the Judge Charles Smith, really wanted to take into consideration a lot of mitigating factors for Dixie, including the fact that she had been a multiple-time domestic abuse victim. But this case, based on the sentencing guidelines put together by the Iowa legislature in the late 1980s or early 1990s, I believe. But the judge was forced. He was handcuffed. He was forced to give Dixie a flat 50-year prison sentence, no questions asked. So the sentencing was just a formality, and the point of the sentencing, the judge actually took the opportunity to kind of scold the state of Iowa and the Iowa legislature for putting these, quote, get tough laws in place, where he felt in this case he should have had a lot of wiggle room and opportunity to give Dixie a sentence that he felt fit the, appropriateness of her crime, but also took all these other things in consideration, Ed. So she was just given a flat 50-year prison sentence, and it's not till 2007 or 2008 when Iowa Governor Tom Vilsack, who's now in Obama's administration, but he was able to commute the bottom portion of Dixie's sentence as far as just making her eligible for parole after she had served 10 full years, which was last year. And last year, that was the first time she was eligible for parole, and Iowa decided, the parole board decided to reject her bid for parole last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now, this is interesting, and I'm watching this very carefully, actually. But I think that there's a good chance that she may get out even later this year. Actually, she was up for her parole just a few weeks ago, her annual parole review again, and they denied it. But they also put in their report that they wanted her to undergo or just to be evaluated by a psychologist, and they told her that they would reconsider her case again in another 60 days or so. Okay. So last week I was talking to the my contactor, at the Iowa Department of Corrections, and he told me that there may be an update, or at least the parole board will be updated on her situation, no later than sometime in the month of September. So I'm starting to follow this case. Obviously, I'm keeping an eye on it because obviously, if there's an opportunity to update my book, or an epilogue, I'll certainly do that here. But last year I was kind of stunned that she got just flatly rejected last year. But it also seemed that she had been having some disciplinary problems too in the last couple of years there, and so I think they took that into consideration and it worked against her. But
what kind of disciplinary problems?
Oh gosh, now I have all the stuff in the book, and I have the sheet on it. I think it was more or less not following orders, not following the rules. It wasn't like she was, trying to dig a hole or anything like that, or pole vault out of the prison. But I think it was just more or less disciplinary infractions and not getting along or following orders, of certain prison officials and stuff like that. So.
Okay.
But those were marks that were on her record when I had requested, through a public records request, just any and all, matters, of discipline over the last 10 years or so. There was a handful of things that she had and I remember the parole board even, I think, had pointed out in one of their letters to her, that, they urged her to, do a better job, more or less, of, addressing those kinds of issues and stuff. So maybe, if she's had a pretty stellar year since then, and the one thing she pointed out, and this is kind of an interesting part of this case too, Ed, is that she still has that house back in Iowa. She actually became romantically involved with another fella after she had shot and killed her husband, to make the story even more bizarre than it already was, that fella had stayed with Dixie for about 3 months. He would stay overnight with her, pretty much on weekends, and again, it was kind of a head scratcher for the sheriff, but kind of how and why this fellow named Jeff Duty never noticed or never even bothered to wonder why Dixie would never sleep in her back bedroom, or why this room was cordoned off, more or less. But that fellow's still in the house, still got the house now, and the former sheriff was telling me last week that if Dixie does get paroled, he fully expects her to move back to Defiance, Iowa, and take up refuge, in the same house that she had lived the last, the prior 20 years before she killed Scott.
Well, wait a second. Okay. So she kills this guy. How soon after she kills this guy does she move in the new boyfriend?
Well, actually, he came. He started dating her the following May. So we're talking. Let's see. Talking about 8 or 9 months afterwards. It was on it was at a neighborhood barbecue, or one of the neighbors had a barbecue on Memorial Day weekend of 2003. So just for context or for listeners, Scott was killed around August 30th, around September 1st of 2002. So now we're up to May of 2003. So Scott's still dead in the bed, with the back bedroom doors closed, and Dixie meets this fellow named Jeff Duty, who lived about 30 or 40 miles away in Ida Grove, Iowa. They struck up a relationship really quickly, to the point where, again, he's staying at Dixie's place on the weekends, and still working his job, and staying in his town during the week. But after she was charged with murder, he stuck with her. They actually, I think, got married around the time that she had her murder trial. And again, my understanding is he's still living in that house back in Defiance, Iowa now, 11 years later, and has the property.
I wonder what is. I wonder if Emily Post ever addressed this issue of what is the proper etiquette to invite a new boyfriend into your home after killing your husband, who's in the back bedroom.
Well, I don't know. In this case, the thing was, I think there was 3 bedrooms in the house, and there was kind of a back room that was kind of behind the house, kind of off the kitchen. And my understanding was that that's where Dixie and Jeff would spend the night, or right. Cuddle or whatever and stuff like that. But that was obviously a question, and that fella got. I don't remember if he was grilled on the stand, but he was questioned on the stand by the prosecutor as far as just kind of how and why, he was not inquisitive, why he didn't, notice anything. And his testimony was along the lines of just that he presumed that, that's where Dixie and Scott had a lot of abuse. So he just assumed, he testified, more or less that, he just figured that the room, brought awful memories to Dixie, so he didn't, try to go in there or anything like that. And, the sheriff again reiterated that he never had any evidence at all, anything that suggested that somehow Jeff Duty knew anything, or was helping conceal this body. And that's the other thing, too. What do you think of this fact? She had all that time, too, Ed, 14 months, to get rid of the body. Yeah, and if she would have did that, what's the likelihood she would have ever been charged with murder? Probably nothing. As soon as she shot him, she just basically pulled the covers up over his head and left him that way for 500 days or something like that.
And what did this guy say, the new boyfriend? He says, well, she never told me anything about it. I had no idea.
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. I never interviewed him at all. In fact, nobody did. He just was very reserved, or just didn't want anything to do with the press and stuff like that. So I never got a story out of him other than, like I said, whatever he testified to is what I wrote down. Whatever he told the police and stuff like that. But just yeah, I don't know. And it was a ranch house. This wasn't exactly something like Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan, or,
right.
Or some famous celebrity, Tom Brady, that's got like 55 rooms in the house and a 100,000 square foot house. It's a typical, it's an average sized, ranch house, 3 bedroom. All our listeners, could visualize this.
Okay, let's take a quick commercial break while we're visualizing this. With the dead body, the new boyfriend. Oh, my God. Okay, we're here with John Ferak, Bloody Lies, a CSI Scandal in the Heartland. And in this fascinating book, I'd love to hear about this. And I hope she gets out, though. Dixie's Last Stand, was it murder or self-defense? And why didn't they ever clean that back bedroom? And then this other book here is, oh, my God. Body of Proof.
Body Proof.
Yeah, Body of Proof, Tainted Evidence in the Murder of Jessica O'Grady. We'll be right back after these messages. And now, a word from our sponsors. Pacific West Bamboo, your premier source for sustainable building material. They provide construction-grade and craft-grade bamboo material for all your indoor, outdoor, and gardening needs. Contact them for event planning and display building as well. 503-839-8126. Or you go to their new website, pacificwestbamboo.com. Or you can contact them on Facebook at Pacific West Bamboo. That's 503-839-8126. Amanda from Pacific West Bamboo was our first sponsor. She's been so good to us, so please support her in return. I want to make everybody aware of our new members section at www.oppermanreport.com. You can go there and sign up for a monthly, quarterly, or yearly subscription. You can even purchase episodes one by one. You get full access to brand new original content, new guests, new uncensored interviews, my own investigations and reports, and we're going to be adding sections with documents, images, police reports, either provided by myself or by my guests, or for my own investigations, my own reports. So you can go to oppermanreport.com and you can sign up there tonight. You can start listening tonight. Strawman. I want to mention Strawman. Strawman is a band out of Toronto, Canada. They're good friends of the Opperman Report. They're a trio of guys who share the same mindset most of us here do, and they put that energy into their words and music. So check them out at strawmanmusic.com and drop them a line to let them know that you heard them here on the Opperman Report. We'll be doing an interview with Sean Duffy soon. You can get an autographed copy of my book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator, by visiting my PI website, emailrevealer.com. We also offer a computer and cell phone forensics. We can recover deleted text messages to uncover infidelity. We offer asset searches, locates, email tracing, background reports, and we can even trace your spouse's email address back to internet dating websites to catch them cheating online. You can reach us at 800-572-9762, or you can email me at emailrevealer@aol.com. New World Mexican Women. Everyone loves the New World Mexican Women, and their line of fine, handcrafted, authentic Mexican jewelry of stone mosaic and abalone stone inlay. In their first book, titled New World Mexican Women, available on lulu.com, they teach you how to make this jewelry, and they have a collection of love letters to their men from their hometown that have immigrated to the United States to find work. They have also published a new book entitled Azuquina to the Rodeo. It's about a young girl that falls in love with a rodeo bull rider, and she runs away with him without telling her family. You can find the New World Mexican Women by Googling New World Mexican Women. And you can ask them about their deals on wholesaling their fine jewelry and all of the other projects that they have going on. If you'd like to have your business or website advertised here and promoted all over the world on dozens of stations every day, give us a call at 800-572-9762 or email oppermanreport@gmail.com. And now back to our show. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're here tonight with John Ferak. Bloody Lies, a CSI scandal in the Heartland. Dixie's Last Stand. Was it murder or self-defense? And now we're going to get into his newest book, Bloody Body of Proof, Tainted Evidence in the Murder of Jessica O'Grady. And this goes back to that first CSI investigator, right?
Correct, yeah. And, and I mentioned this case, this May 2006 murder of Jessica O'Grady at the kind of the very end of Bloody Lies. And in fact, there's actually a photograph of COVID finding some evidence in the Jessica O'Grady case that I actually used that photo in my Bloody Lies book as well. But it's unusual to have what I think, what's considered a sequel for true crime books and stuff like that. But really in this case, though, the sequel aspect is kind of more about, the CSI commander rather than the murders per se. But kind of how it all ties together was the mystery of Jessica O'Grady's disappearance took place on the night of May 10th of 2006. And Jessica is a beautiful, charming, really well-liked and friendly and cheerful college girl. She went to the University of Nebraska at their Omaha campus. She stayed close to home. She grew up in Omaha. And she started to date another boy her age named Christopher Edwards. The problem with all this was Christopher Edwards already had a serious girlfriend at the same time, and Jessica knew this. And Chris was already romantically involved with this other girl, and he had gotten this other girl pregnant just a few months earlier. Okay, and the story with Jessica's situation was that she thought, or she believed that she was pregnant, and was in the process of trying to get Chris to understand or come to the realization, that he might be the father of this child, and so on the night of May 10th of 2006, she left her apartment, and she lived with a couple other girls her age, and told them, she was going over to see Chris. She never comes home the next day. Friends kind of are, mystified. They know it's not like her to just up and disappear, and it certainly wouldn't have been in her character to just up and run away. So this really becomes a huge case, and it really draws a lot of intense media coverage throughout Nebraska and the Heartland during the summer months of 2006. Again, there's some real good police work actually in this case, in the early days of the case, by the Omaha Police Department, the city police department, where they eventually go to the home. Chris Edwards was actually staying. He was living at his aunt's home at the time this was all going down, and the police, get consent from Chris and his aunt to come inside the house. They eventually go downstairs to the basement to his bedroom, and look around the room, and notice that his bed's in the basement. Chris kind of becomes reluctant, a little resistant, and he makes it kind of clear to the detective that he really doesn't want the cop poking around by his bed. To this detective's credit, actually, he kind of thinks fast on his feet, and and suggests that, well, maybe Jessica could have left a suicide note, which was obviously preposterous. I mean, there was no thought at all that Jessica committed suicide, but he was trying to convince Chris, to kind of win him over. He's like, "Can I look around the bed?" And Chris reluctantly says yes. The detective kind of lifts up the covers and notices that there's just a large amount of blood on the mattress, on the bottom of the mattress. Essentially, Chris had flipped over his mattress, and this mattress was just soaked. It was drenched with Jessica's blood on the other side of it.
Well, let me ask you a question. Now, how soon after her disappearance did the cops come in and find this mattress?
We're talking, 6 days, I would say. She disappeared on the night of May 10th, May 11th. The police were notified that she disappeared 2 days later, so I think that was the 12th or the 13th. It was actually within a matter of hours that the police had found her car, is where they sprang into action and went and questioned Chris Edwards and received permission to go inside the house to look around, and that's where they found the bloody mattress.
Amazing! You would think with evidence like that, he would keep him out of the house.
As far as yeah, that's a great point, and
I got a bloody mattress in my house.
That day. Well, I was going to say, I'm trying to remember some of the chronology of this. He went down to the police station that day and gave a statement, was interviewed,
right.
And then he came back to the house. They were in the house, and actually they're upstairs, and the police are asking about the idea of kind of, doing a search or just kind of looking around his bedroom or basement, whatever, basement, bedroom. And that's actually where he turns to his aunt, and says, couldn't we do this in a couple days? And, and the cops actually, again, thinking fast or whatever, they tell him to kind of win him over, reassure him. They're like, hey, you control the search. They're like, you tell us, if we want, if we're, I can't remember exactly how they worded it, but more or less, they let him, they let him feel like he was in the driver's seat, that they weren't going to look somewhere that he didn't want them looking, okay, and either he wasn't thinking smart, or didn't think he needed a lawyer, or wasn't realizing, or also didn't want to give them the impression that he was hiding the body, or was guilty of something. He went along and just casually walked downstairs with them, but when they got close to the bed, that's when he at least expressed some reluctance, and kind of, made a comment about not wanting the detectives to poke around the bed.
Okay, so the cops kind of tell him, listen, we're starting to get warm. Just warn us away from the spot. And we'll call time out. Okay, all right, that'll work. Okay, so then what happened with this guy here?
Well, again, this is the case is really going to change a lot, because what happens is, and again, this gets into some of these turf issues or jurisdictional issues, but that night it becomes, somebody realizes in law enforcement, well, they decided then they needed to go out and get a search warrant, because once the blood was found, once the mattress was found, Edwards and his family were no longer cooperative, with the cops. So again, to kind of dot their I's, cross their T's, they went out that night to get a search warrant from a judge to stay at the property and just, tear through everything. Sure. But it becomes apparent that the house is actually outside of the city of Omaha's jurisdiction, which meant that the Omaha Police Department really kind of had to get out of the case. So the Douglas County Sheriff's Office shows up around midnight that night, and the Omaha cops are there and kind of pass the case over. And that's where Dave Kofod then, shows up too. He gets out there shortly after midnight. Two of his CSIs were out there, and the Douglas County Sheriff's Office takes over the case. And Dave Kofod, who, again, at this point in time, had gotten away with planting evidence in at least two high-profile murder cases, hadn't been caught yet on anything, and had just gotten away with planting evidence in that car that we talked about earlier in the show. He'd gotten away with planting the blood in that car just 3 weeks earlier before this had all happened.
Wow.
Now he's the head CSI that's actually going to help. He's going to spearhead the investigation from that moment forward on the Chris Edwards murder case. So the bloody mattress gets taken back to his crime lab, later that night or early the next morning. But again, they search the property, and nobody can find Jessica O'Grady. They can't find her body anywhere, and Chris Edwards is just clammed up, so he's not talking to the cops from that moment forward. And up to this point in time, just for historical purposes, there had never been a case that had gone to trial in Nebraska involving a no-body murder case. So those are all things that the police, the sheriff's office, Kofod, and especially the prosecutor's office was forefront to them. They really wanted to make sure that if they were going to accuse Chris Edwards of murder in this case without Jessica's body, they wanted to make sure that they had an ironclad case to present before a jury, because again, this was a very, very, very high-profile murder mystery, and again, with her disappearance, and and the whole community kind of come together, a lot of searches of lakes, ditches, parks, and recreation areas for Jessica. A lot of people in the Omaha community were really moved and captivated by this story and by this case. So that was something the police and the prosecutor's office, especially COVID, of all people, was very cognizant of Ed.
Yeah, she's a pretty girl too. You can see the picture on the cover of the book. So that always gets a lot of attention to these kind of cases too.
Yeah, and like I said, Jessica was a really nice girl, and it's just unfortunate, tragic actually, that she wound up getting involved with Chris. And the thing is, too, about him is that even to her roommate, to Jessica's roommates, though, Chris Edwards did not present any evil vibes. So they had met him, on at least one occasion where he, stayed the night with Jessica, at their place, and they spent some time with him, and they didn't, pick up on anything that led them to believe that somehow he was really sinister or evil or a dark monster at all. But as time moved forward, though, and Chris just clammed up and refused to tell anybody anything about Jessica's disappearance. And I should point out, too, I almost forgot about this, actually, but when the bloody mattress is found, Chris's story, or when he tells the police, and his story when it goes to trial, as outrageous as this will sound for listeners that are not familiar with the case, his argument is that it was menstrual blood, that he and Jessica, must have had sex on that bed, and this blood that was there was from her menstrual cycle. Obviously, that was. There was no way that was possible, but that's going to be the defense that he and his lawyer, Steve Loeffler, are going to present. And again, as I mentioned this earlier on the show, a lot of these same characters kind of come up over and over again on these cases. The same lawyer that represents Chris Edwards, the same defense lawyer that Chris Edwards has in this case, Steve Loeffler, is also going to be the same lawyer in 2010 when Dave Kofod is accused of planting evidence. That's going to be the same lawyer that Kofod is going to use to defend himself. Yeah. And again, Omaha, there's 1 million people in the metro area. It's the city itself of 500,000 people. But yet you have a lot of these just a lot of these overlapping. It's kind of like the Kevin Bacon,
Sure.
Syndrome and stuff like that. Even in this case, the chief prosecutor in the Chris Edwards murder case, when it goes to trial, her name is Leanne Ruddlesdorf. Her younger brother happened to be one of Dave Kofod's most trusted employees. And C.L. Ruddlesdorf happened to be with Kofod that time when he was searching that dumpster back in 2003 down in Plattsmouth, Nebraska, in the little boy's murder. So it's just you just have a lot of these people that kind of are all intertwined or interconnected to each other in a lot of these cases, Ed.
Well, it is a small world, I've noticed that over and over. But now what kind of indications do you have, though, that Kofod was planting evidence in this case?
Well, the thing, there's, again, some of these circumstances that came up in this case did kind of mirror his behavior in these other cases. So first and foremost, the car of Chris Edwards was impounded that same night that bloody mattress was hauled out of his house, okay? Chris Edwards had a Honda Accord, and this car was just filthy. He had a tennis racket in the back. He had all kinds of, empty, well, I should say, not empty beer bottles. They were actually full. They were full bottles of Heineken, and just, and water, just a lot of crap, in his car, okay? And he had a tire in the back, in the back of the trunk, okay? The car is taken to the sheriff's office that night. It's photographed as well. And the next day, while Kofod is off, or at least not at work yet, after basically pulling a double shift, two of his employees, again, C.L. Ruddlesdorf went through the aunt's car, but a different CSI named Josh Connolly was assigned to inspect and pour through Chris Edwards' car. And according to Josh's report, he spent about 5 hours and 40 minutes going through the car photographing evidence, meticulously marking evidence that he saw, and just document everything that he found. Okay. Josh, nowhere in any of his reports, nowhere does he find, and he later testifies to this, he didn't find any blood anywhere in the car. Colford comes to work later that night or later that day and becomes aware, that Connolly had searched Chris Edwards' car and nothing was found. The following morning, again, the next day at 7 in the morning, Colford assigns one of his veteran employees, a fellow by the name of Bill Caulfield. He assigns Caulfield to go out to the car and concentrate on the trunk. Caulfield's going to go out there as well. This time, when the trunk is opened up, on the inside upper lid, there's a large blood stain that's on the upper or on the upper gasket, the rubber gasket of the trunk, basically the size of a thumb. And then Colford's going to crawl inside the trunk, and he's going to find a large blood stain, I should say stains plural, on the inside of the upper metal of the trunk. And they're going to cut this metal out and take the rubber gasket out, and it's going to test positive for Jessica O'Grady's blood several days later. So again, you have the situation where, and it was a great question you asked, Ed, as far as just kind of what do you see? Well, in that Murdock murder case where Colford's going to go to prison for that situation there, he supervises an 8-hour search of the presumed getaway car. Nothing is found. Colford takes it upon himself to go out there a week later. Lo and behold, there's blood found in the only area of the trunk that's searched. Or I should say the dashboard, the car that's searched. In the Edwards case, Colford assigned one of his best employees, Josh Connolly, to search the car. Josh is an honest guy. He's got no reason also he has no reason to also give just a half-hearted effort either, Ed. So Josh found nothing in that car, no blood, but Colford's going to take it upon himself the very next morning to assign somebody to come back with him and and concentrate on the trunk. And what do they find? They find large blood stains in the trunk that day. So it's those kinds of things, Ed, that again are kind of raise eyebrows and have raised some suspicion about whether or not Colford may have been planting blood in the Jessica O'Grady case to help build a stronger case against Chris Edwards. Because keep in mind, the case had not even gone to. Chris Edwards was still free at this point in time. That his car was searched and the blood was found. He had not been charged with the murder. So again, if any evidence in the Jessica O'Grady case was falsified or manufactured, it would have been done so to help make sure that the case was sealed by basically airtight for the prosecutor once it would eventually go to trial in Omaha, Nebraska.
But Colford was never charged in that case, right?
Correct. He was only charged in the first. He was charged with the Murdock case, but the judge allowed the prosecutor to present evidence in another case. And actually, I interviewed that special prosecutor, Clarence Mock, who was successful in prosecuting Colford at that historic bench trial. And because he had actually studied this case, he studied the Jessica O'Grady, Chris Edwards murder case as well, and he thought long and hard about also using this case when he went to trial. And I explain in the book kind of Clarence's position, was, and this is a good point that I really wouldn't have picked up on, but Clarence was fully expecting Colford to go to a jury trial. Okay, it wasn't, again, until the last, week or so or weeks before the trial that Colford waived his right to a jury trial, asked for a bench trial. So Clarence thought that it would have been too complicated, and he also thought that his other two cases were just rock solid, and they both happened in Cass County, Nebraska, whereas this was an Omaha case. But as he said, he's like in a circumstantial case, sometimes your weakest link, could destroy your case or bring down your other, amazing, or astounding evidence and stuff. So he said just for tactical reasons, he decided not to bring up the Chris Edwards, Jessica O'Grady case when he took COVID to trial, and sustained the conviction against him. But again, it's COVID. Correct, absolutely. It's important for listeners to know COVID was never charged with any crime related to the Jessica O'Grady murder case, and as of this point in time, Chris Edwards is still trying to get his case to get a new trial through post-conviction, making the argument that Dave Kopit had manufactured key evidence that was used against him at his murder trial.
How many years did Edwards get?
Oh, I'm sorry?
How many years did Edwards get?
Oh, Edwards, he ultimately was sentenced to 100 years. He was 20 years old at the time of the sentencing. Again, the murder happened, he was arrested at age 19. And the judge, and a lot of people were hoping that he would get a life sentence. He was held based on second degree. Again, it's the same charge that Dixie Shanahan was convicted of in Iowa, where, Dixie got that flat 50-year sentence. Right. Well, just across the river in Nebraska, the sentencing guidelines are much, much different. The judges have a lot more latitude. So second-degree murder conviction in Nebraska carries a range from 20 years all the way to life. Wide range. And in this case, the judge decided to give Chris Edwards 80 years for murder and 20 years for use of a weapon to commit a felony. And he made those run consecutive. So it was a 100-year sentence. And he basically took into account that there had been a number of other second-degree murder convictions out of the same courthouse by fellow judges that did not throw the book necessarily at defendants that were convicted of second-degree murder. So, Edwards is still in prison right now, and he's serving his time in Tecumseh, at the state prison in Tecumseh, which actually just had a horrific riot, Ed, about 2 months ago, where 2 inmates were actually killed, and they did about the other inmates did about $500,000 worth of damage to that prison back in May.
Oh, brother. Well, John Ferak, thank you so much. We're out of time. John Ferak, the author of Bloody Lies, A CSI Scandal in the Heartland, Body of Proof, Tainted Evidence in the Murder of Jessica O'Grady, and Dixie's Last Stand. Was it murder or self-defense? John, thank you so much for coming on. We'll be looking for you. All those books, you can find them on the Opperman Report blog.com. Thank you.
Ed, thanks very much for having me on tonight.
Good night.
Have a great night.
You too. Okay, we'll be restarting. What I'm going to do here now is I'm going to take a quick commercial break. On Awake, we're going to be saying goodnight to, we already said goodnight to PSM. We're saying goodnight to Talk Superstation. Good night, guys. I love you. We're still on Awake Radio. I'll be playing a commercial over there. And then I'm going to be restarting Spreaker. So if you're hanging out on Spreaker, we're going to end the show over here and restart a new show called The After Show.